Hi, and welcome to Let's Talk Safety. I'm your host, Dylan Sutherland from Protector Safety Gear. Throughout this series, we'll be interviewing industry experts to provide our audience with valuable insights on various categories of PPE. Topics will range from selection and standards to maintenance and care. This should ultimately assist you in selecting fit-for-purpose safety solutions for your site. From these discussions, we will create resources such as Toolbox Talk downloads and blogs, all of which will be available on our website, www.protector.co.za, for download. If we had to understand just the general lifespan, so I'm on a construction site, there's, I don't know if I can say medium amount of dust, and the work pace is general. It's a normal day's work, nothing too strenuous. What would I look at a lifespan? Can I use that same mask for the whole week?
Not on a disposable respirator. All disposable respirators, according to the EN standard and the South African SANS 50149 standard, stipulate that it is a single shift use product. So in other words, if I'm issued with a respirator this morning, by the end of my shift, I need to dispose of it because tomorrow when I walk in, I need to get a new respirator. Now, if you're talking on reusable respirators, yes, your filters will last a lot longer because your particle filters are reusable. But again, I can't tell you for sure how long it's going to last. It all depends on those values we just spoke about: time, concentration, your type of job, the atmospheric humidities. So there's several things that need to be considered before I can give you an idea. What we would suggest, however, is that you do an analysis. And it's easy to do that. All you do is you hand over that respirator with the cartridges or filters to the user, mark the date and time on it, and the moment the person starts to feel breakthrough on that filter, could be in a day, it could be in a week, it could be in 2 weeks, you need to record that and then build in a safety factor, and then that would give you your time period. And then the last point I'd like to make is that once the person has been trained and they're now using the respirator, they should actually be conducting a fit check before they walk into their area that's contaminated. And fit checking should be done every time you put on a respirator, just to make sure that you have a proper seal around your breathing zone.
Awesome. That's very insightful, and I think next time I have to put on a disposable or any respirator, I'll definitely do a few more checks and get some training. Let's get into the next space. I mean, disposable is one element. How do we look at the reusable side of things? Because fundamentally it works similar, but in terms of what you get out of it, it's quite significantly different. Can you give us a brief understanding? Let us understand why it would be better, or in what application would it be better?
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I do product recommendations for my customers, I try and encourage the use of reusable respirators because there are a lot of differences that are beneficial to the user. For instance, reusable respirator comes in different sizes. So remember, we've talked about making sure that the respirator is fit for purpose. It also needs to include the fact that your respirator should fit you correctly. So having the 3 sizes makes it easier to get a proper fit on a respirator. So that's one element you need to look at. Secondly, when you look at a reusable respirator, these respirators already have an inner face seal on the product. So it does adhere to your face a lot better, and it does help give you more protection in terms of the fit and leakage around your breathing zone. The third element with a reusable respirator is that it's just that, it's reusable. So when you're talking costs, it actually does reduce your cost over a period of time. And then your filters that you're going to be using are also reusable. So it's not like your disposables where you're going to be tossing them out at the end of every shift. And then you have combinations. So if you're being exposed to gases and vapors as well as particulates, you can have a combination filter that will cover both. Now, when you talk disposable, that's only protecting you against dusts and mists. So the reusables also come in a half face piece or a full face respirator. So should you require eye protection or face protection as well, your reusable full face will then cover that for you. So yes, there's a lot of difference between a disposable and a reusable. And quite honestly, I would go with reusable respirators.
Fantastic. Now, with the reusable, we obviously have to attach the filter that obviously protects us. What would that look like? What would making sure that is in an appropriate condition? Because, I mean, I might have had one in my car for the last year. Can I just go pop that on my mask and off I go? Would I be okay?
Definitely not. With all respiratory, there is a shelf life and there's a use life. With 3M products, you're looking at a 5-year shelf life. The use life differs on how you maintain it. So talking about reusables, when you take off your reusable respirator, you should be putting this product into a sealed container. So if you buy a 3M product, it does have resealable bag that comes with it. So at the end of your shift, or if you're taking a tea break, you should be removing your respirator and popping it into this bag and then zipping it so that you keep out the contamination while not in use, because these products are still working whether they're on your face or left on a desk somewhere. So going back to longevity again, as you mentioned, if it's lying in the back of your car, it's also being exposed to the air in that atmosphere. It's also being exposed to UV light and other contaminants that you may not be aware of that may be on the surface of where you're placing it. So when you take off your respirator, you either put it into a seal bag, or if you've got a plastic storage container, it should go in there, and that will help to maintain the life of the cartridges that are on it.
And obviously ensure that there's no additional contaminants that enter the user, right?
Correct. So talking about contaminants entering the respirator, very often when I walk on a site, I would see workers with their respirators hanging around their necks. That's not how you should be using it. If it's not on your face and you're not using the product immediately, it should be stored away. Because as you walk around, and especially if you've got it hanging around your neck, it's being exposed to all the air and atmosphere around you. So a lot of dust and dirt could collect in the cup itself. And then when you put that respirator on again, you're going to be inhaling everything that's settled on the inside of the respirator. So again, if you're going to be leaving your work zone, pack your respirator away.
Great. It reminds me of, we went to a mine once and they made me clean shave. Why?
You should say thank you. They were saving your life.
There we go.
Okay. So when you wear respirators, and it should be mandatory at every site that requires the use of respirators, the user needs to be clean shaven. The reason for that is your hair is a barrier. So the hair follicles are actually quite hard. And if you put a respirator on with a beard, you are actually creating gaps for air to enter your breathing zone. So your hair follicle actually stops the respirator from creating a seal to your face. And that allows for contamination to enter.
Okay, so something as small as a hair can stop the seal from being
100%.
Great. Last point on this is with regards to the filters on the masks. Is there a general lifespan of them? I fully understand that you've mentioned it depends on the use, it depends on the breathing, and I would assume that would filter through to reusable. Is there a general lifespan that we can understand for use? What is that in hours?
Again, that is something I really can't answer and give you a definitive answer unless I've had an assessment done on your site. But basically, when you look at your cartridges that are protecting you against chemicals, you need to think of it, and 3M has this car park analogy that we do. So let's say, for instance, a chemical enters. If there's a parking space available, it'll park in there. But of course, if all the parking spaces are used up, then you're going to have breakthrough, where the chemical enters the cartridge, but it's got nowhere to go and park itself, so it just exits. And that's when you're going to have your breakthrough and start to actually taste or smell the contaminant. Also, there's different chemicals that react differently. So it could be where you have a chemical that enters your cartridge and goes straight out because there's nothing in the chemical makeup of your cartridge that can bind that chemical to a spot. So when you look at your cartridges, you need to consider, what are you being exposed to? How are the chemicals reacting with each other? And will it have a detrimental effect on the carbon that's in your reusable respirator cartridge?
Cool. So, sorry, the last one was the last point, but you're creating a really interesting thought of, how does the person understand that breakthrough moment? Are they able, as the user, to pick that up?
If they haven't been sensitized to it, yes, they will pick it up. If you have a proper fitting respirator, you will note a difference because you've had a certain taste or smell that came through when you were just using a respirator in its normal form. And the moment there's breakthrough, you're definitely going to pick up the contamination. But some people don't have that sensitivity level, and they may not pick it up. And that's why, as I said in the beginning, you need to do an analysis to determine how long, as a company, you want to use a filter or a cartridge.
Do companies do that? Not all of them. I mean, you don't know all of them, but do the majority of companies actually do that?
The ones I work with, yes, because I insist. But you're right. A lot of people don't do that. They just rely on the worker to come to them and say, look, I've had this cartridge and I can taste or smell the contaminant. I have instances where companies would issue on a monthly basis, but they haven't done this analysis. So for you, it may be okay. You haven't had a breakthrough and you're covered. But me, I may be a person that's breathing heavily or in a more contaminated area. And within 3 weeks, my cartridge may be used up. But because it's only being issued on a monthly basis, I will continue to work with an expired or used up cartridge.
Cool. So I'm going to put on my safety hat, and now I'm the safety manager or officer of a company. Should I be doing a survey to set the minimum and then basically say, look guys, at maximum, we should be using these things for 2 shifts, 16 hours, and then replace. But keep in mind that some people might be affected earlier, and open that conversation for the users. Is that how we should be approaching it? And how often would we do that assessment then?
The easiest thing would be to actually use the lowest value. So if, for instance, you were able to use a cartridge for a whole month, but when they did the analysis, I was only able to use it for 3 weeks, I would say you should have your change-out schedule at 3 weeks.
To protect everybody so that might be exposed. Covered. And then how often would you suggest that kind of assessment gets done on that site?
Well, it depends. Now, if you are having a huge staff turnover, you'd need to do it every time you get new people in to assess them as well. Or if there's been a change in your process, for instance. Maybe you've done some engineering controls that eliminate some of the contaminant, then you would need to assess, maybe you could use it longer. If you haven't done that, or let's say there's been machinery that broke down, you would need to do that assessment again because you could be exposed to more dust and dirt and chemical.
Or potentially different. I mean, maybe there's vapors and now there's a broken machine that starts exposing different particles.
Correct. So every time there would be a change in your work atmosphere or in the workforce itself, I would say you would need to redo this.
Cool. So we're starting to understand this certification of these units, and obviously every single mask or every single piece of PPE you use should have quite easily traceable or identifiable standards on it. There's 2 parts of this. So one is there any not good behaviors happening where people illegally stamp things? Because for me, I could take a mask and just put a standard on there. Does that happen?
It did happen, especially during COVID. So we saw a lot of unethical behavior taking place during that time. There was a lot of counterfeit product that was brought into the country, besides illegal product. As I mentioned earlier, we had people that were creating little stamps that just put an N95 or a KN95 or even EN stamp onto a product. You should, if you are going to purchase a respirator, you should ask for documentation. That documentation should include the product data sheet, and it should also include the product homologation certification, which says that it has been brought to the notice of the national regulator and that you are passing all of the standard requirements for that product to be marketed and sold in the country. So if somebody comes to you with a product, even if I came to you as 3M with a product, you should be asking me for the homologation certificate, because that will authenticate that this is an original product.
Fantastic. So let's try to break it down as a really simple step-by-step. Step one is we need to understand what the site requirements is. We need to understand how are they using it, how frequently they would be reused or needing to replace, look after it, care and maintenance. Once we've understood that, we should then take this to the point of, is the product that we have selected that meets all of these requirements actually appropriately certified and homologated into South Africa's standard? Probably there would be an EN, not probably, there would be an EN certificate and standard on the product. Once that homologation and all of those questions have been asked of the supplier, then procurement should be getting involved with, this is what we need to make sure we appropriately protect the people that are actually in harm's way.
100% correct. But again, when you are looking at procuring the product, you also have to make sure that you are getting the original product, because we've also had instances where people during COVID brought in what we called a golden sample, so a product that met all of the specifications. They got issued with the homologation certification, but then when they started importing, they were bringing in substandard product. And that leads to the counterfeit as well. So we had one product, which is a medical respirator, that was hugely counterfeited during COVID. Do some in-depth analysis and do your own research before you just buy a product. I was contacted because somebody was offering one of our customers the medical device, and they were offering them something like 2 trillion pieces of this product. During that period of COVID, we were only manufacturing 150,000 a year. So where did you get 2 trillion from? So do some research before you just, accept even a brand like 3M. Make sure you're buying it from a reputable company, somebody who has got links with 3M and you can verify that product link.
Have you ever been exposed to a site and had to really get uncomfortable to ensure that you're providing a client with fit-for-purpose safety?
Yes, I have. It happens every time I have to go into an underground mine because I am claustrophobic. But my one experience that stands out is I went through to a gold mine, a rather deep gold mine. And in my visit underground, we were climbing up to the stopes and I had to crawl because there was overhanging rock. So I'm on my tummy and crawling towards the area that I need to assess. And I felt something go over my hand. It's pretty dark down there, and the only visible light is the camp lamp on your head. And as I crawled again, something went over my hand again. And this time I looked, and the light hit a snake. So this snake had fallen through the shaft and had now kind of evolved down there. And he was probably attracted to the headlamps. And that freaked me out. I screamed and I started scurrying off to the right of me. And thankfully the foreman was with me and he grabbed my ankle. Because had he not done that, and I had crawled another 2 meters, I would have fallen down a shaft because it's so dark down there. You see absolutely nothing.
I think it talks to how I know you as well, and making sure that you do go the extra length. You've got a vast amount of knowledge. You've got a vast amount of understanding different requirements and applications. The fact that you still get down there and make sure, because ultimately I would assume the reason is every single situation is different, and making sure the appropriate solution is fitted to that requirement.
Absolutely, because my philosophy is that I won't ask you to wear something if I haven't tried it myself. Because again, we mentioned this in the beginning. It's very easy for someone in an office to sit there and say, oh, I think you need a helmet and an eyewear and respiratory. But again, as a person, you have very little real estate. And when I talk real estate, I'm talking about on your face. You have very little real estate. Now you've got to have a helmet, eyewear, respiratory, hearing products. Does it all work together? Does it all actually fit for purpose in terms of not impeding the next product? So if I'm wearing a respirator, can I still wear eyewear without it lifting the eyewear off and creating gaps? If I'm wearing hearing protection, is it now getting in the way of the arms of my eyewear, or is it dislodging my respirator? So these are things you need to look at, and we then talk about compatibility between the different PPE being used.
Well, one thing I must say is I'm really excited at how you're ending it off, because I think this podcast is designed for that. It's meant to share information, and let's consider everything, because to your point, we can't just look at PPE in isolation. The reality is you generally have a full body of PPE. They need to work together, and if they don't, you probably, if my hair on my chin can stop a seal of a respirator, I don't want to know what the other PPE interfering with that PPE looks like. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and I'm quite sure we'll have you back soon.
Thank you for having me, and we will chat soon.
Thank you for joining us, and I hope this episode added value to you. If you are experiencing any safety challenges on your sites and require any additional information, please do leave us a message on LinkedIn via Protector Safety Gears page, or alternatively follow the link below and share a message with us, because maybe it can create value or valuable conversation for future episodes. Be sure to also follow us on LinkedIn. There will be some valuable information shared from today's discussion.